Good morning. How are you today? It is great to see you today. Let's say hello to our Liberty Hill friends this morning. Hi, y'all. I'm waving. I think most of us are waving. Let's say hello to our Liberty Hill friends today, right? We are all one church family. We just meet in two different houses, and I'm so glad that you are here. And for those of you who are catching this online as well, thank you for following along. Today, we're beginning a brand new series entitled The Weight of Our Words. And here's what we've all been told, or maybe we've heard, is that actions speak louder than words. And when it comes to first-time acquaintances, maybe the neighbors that just moved in down the street, that's probably all true because you kind of got to watch what they do because anybody can just say whatever they want to say to kind of get in good with you. And so in those cases, actions actually do speak louder than words. But when it comes to our most intimate relationships, family, the people we consider our best friends, our inner circle, the words and actions thing, I don't know that actions speak louder than words. It's tough because it's like they're kind of almost equal or kind of neck and neck with each other because words are just so powerful. But the more intimate the relationship, the louder, or perhaps to the point of the series, the weightier those words become. And the greater their capacity to leave a mark for good or bad, or to build up, or to destroy, or encourage, or to discourage, or maybe inspire, or actually pack a punch that wounds. Words in those relationships are powerful. And what's amazing to me is even the words that were left unsaid have the potential to impact the course of a person's life. Now, maybe you've had a different experience than me, but I got to tell you, I have never had anyone tell me what a neighbor or coworker never said. But I've had so many students and single and married adults, even some senior adults say to me, sometimes in tears, a phrase that they never heard their father say. A phrase that they would have given anything to hear their father say. A phrase like, I love you, or I'm proud of you. And if I could add one more, I'm sorry. And that produces, and if that happens to produce emotion in you, doesn't that just prove again the power of words? Because even unspoken words have the potential to impact the trajectory of a person's life. And the point simply being is that words carry weight along with them. And so this isn't a raise your hand question, but have you ever been crushed by someone's words? I mean, you don't have to go back too far. Well, it may be far for some of us, but all you got to do is go back to high school, right? Right? When you heard maybe these words, let's just be friends. And it's like, no, I don't want to be your friend, right? Well, I've always just thought of you like a brother. Well, I don't want to be your brother. I want to kiss you, right? Remember that? And they were trying to let you down slow and easy, but you were crushed, and they walked away, and you're just a mess, and they're thinking that everything's fine, and you just want to skip the rest of the day and go home, and you probably do. Because lives have been shaped by words spoken. Our lives have been shaped by words spoken to us, over us, at us, and about us. They've shaped our childhood, maybe shaped or misshaped your marriage, impacted our confidence. The words spoken to us, at us, or over us have actually, to some extent, determined who we still see in the mirror today. But here's the thing. Nobody would argue with this, that we all recognize the power of other people's words and the power they've had on us. We would all agree that. We all would recognize that. But what we're often slow to recognize is, and I think this is part of the problem, is that we are often slow to admit the fact that our words have equal power in the lives of other people. We've been impacted, but when it comes to you, it's like, no, I'm just me. Like my words are, they're just words, right? But nothing could be further from the truth. And so we use our words sometimes irresponsibly, and not on purpose, but because we just don't understand or recognize the weight that our words carry. And more weight than you may think in specific relationships. And the fact that words have the potential to destroy as well as build, and undermine as well as inspire, that should impact all of us. And so look, this is actually really good advice for anybody. This isn't a religious idea or some sort of Christian insight at all. We all know that we have been impacted by the words of other people and probably recognize that we should at least be careful with our words. But if you're a Christian, if you call yourself a Jesus follower, this is not optional. This isn't just something to think about. This is a priority step for Jesus followers. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at 3 dynamics that play into every conversation you have with someone who is important to you. And these dynamics are at play whether you recognize them or not. Family, friends, and then to some extent, even coworkers and employees. So 3 dynamics that determine what people hear regardless of what we say. And we have all been on the receiving end of all 3 of these, which means it should be easy enough for us to keep them front and center when we're talking to other people, but often, if we're honest, we don't. And so today, I want to give you the first of the 3, but before I do, I want to give you some incentive because again, if you're a Christian or a Jesus follower, this isn't optional. This is literally baked into what it means to follow Jesus. And so in his first letter in the first century, or to his letter in the first century Christians living in Ephesus, the Apostle Paul, who wrote so much of the New Testament, reminds the people in Ephesus about something that we talk about all the time. And it's Jesus' new command that was supposed to direct all of his followers' behavior and thought patterns and all of the speech of Christians. And this whole idea of we are to love other people the way that God has loved us through Jesus. The way we say it around here, and if you're new to RockPointe or today's your first day or you're still kind of finding your way and you're hanging out a little bit, the way we say it is we should always ask the question, what does love ask me to do? And when you're not sure what to say or you're not sure what to do, ask, what does love ask of you? And not just any kind of love, but a very defined and illustrated and modeled for us love that we see in and through Jesus. And so here's what Paul writes. He says, follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children. And then the music changes. And the violins come in and the strings swell, and walk in the way of love. So gentle. So soft, so romantic, so Christian, so passive. But it's not at all if you follow Jesus through the gospel, because it becomes evident the way of love is bold and it is intentional and often it is offensive and it's always sacrificial and it always has the other person in mind. The way of love is attention getting, and it is what stopped people in the Roman Empire in their tracks to say, what's up with these Christians? Why are they doing what they're doing? What is so different about them? Because the way of love impacts people. The way of love, specifically as illustrated by Jesus and lived out by these first century believers, literally changed the world. And this is why I come back to this over and over and over again. Remember this. Please remember this. You get to choose whether or not you follow Jesus. You get to choose that. Nobody chooses that for you. You get to choose. However, you do not get to choose what it looks like, reacts like, or sounds like. That has been prescribed for us. We don't get to define love the way we want to define it because it's already been defined for us. Jesus prescribed it and modeled it for us. And so here's Paul's words when he says, we're back to the verse where he says, walk in the way of love. Walk in the way of love just as Christ loved us. This is his new covenant command. You are to love one another the way he said, I have loved you. And when he said that to them, the next day he actually put on a demonstration of that love that took his breath away and took his life away and took our sin away. And that's the dynamic, that's the power, that's the thing that launched the movement that ultimately would change the world, and you are a part of it today. It's called the church, who follows Jesus. And he said, Christ loved us. And so here's what that looks like. He loved us and gave himself up for us. So if you want to know what the way of love looks like and acts like and sounds like, you look at Jesus. And so what Paul does now is he takes that idea and he applies it specifically to the words that we choose and the words that we use. This is what the way of love sounds like. This is what the Jesus way sounds like. And here's what he says. Do not let any unwholesome word, and unwholesome that word in the first century basically meant stinky, distasteful. It was used to describe rotting fish. So don't let any stinky, distasteful, offensive, rotting word come out of your mouth. In other words, he says, I want you to view your mouth like a gate. And when the stinky, hateful, offensive, rotting words storm the gate, here's what he's telling us, don't let them through. You're the gatekeeper. And honestly, couldn't we just stop the message right there and say, okay, go home and work on that? Because don't we all struggle with that? Because your mouth is a gate, and honestly, why do we struggle with that? Because we're not very good gatekeepers. And I know that because we're all the same and we all use the same excuses. Well, I was just being honest. Could I remind you about something about honesty? Honesty is saying what's true. Honesty is not saying everything that's true. And there's a big difference. I mean, come on, if you say everything that's true, you will have no friends. You'll probably have no job and probably no life. So when you hear yourself excusing your distasteful words, just remember, you weren't being honest, you were being a jerk. And that's a bit different. And so that's the point. And that's the negative, and then he turns the page and he says, okay, that's the negative, so let me give you a way forward. Now look, if you're not a Christian, if you're not a Jesus follower, everything we're talking about from this point forward is totally optional. I have no authority, I have no business telling you how to live your life, I get that. So if you're sitting there going, who is this guy? Well, I'll just tell you, I'm a nobody. But if you're a Christian and you're a Jesus follower, let me tell you what he's saying. He says, but only. He starts out with that. But only. In other words, I want you to be selective with your words. When you think about the words that come out of your mouth, it's like clear plastic purses only and no backpacks, right? We're not going to let anything sneak out there. And this is amazing. He says, but only the words that are good for building others up according to their needs. And when you read that, you think, well, that's just so soft and that's so unproductive. I mean, could you even raise kids that way? Could you do a performance review at work like that? It's like, hey, would you mind coming into work occasionally? I don't want to be too hard on you, but would you try to show up on time sometimes? I mean, could you be a teacher and do that? I mean, can you actually even do this? And the answer is yes. And Paul's point was not just be nice. His point was use your words to build others up. That's his point. Your words are like building material, and when you leave the construction site, Paul says the other person on the other side of you should be built up when you walk away. They should be better for the words you said to them. And this is where, honestly, if I can just be authentic, this is where it starts to break down for me. Because in order for my words to build you up, you know what that means? That means I've got to be a student of you, which means I've got to pay attention to that person in front of me. It means I have to understand that person, and that takes patience. And that takes work. And Paul says the goal is to choose words and to tailor words to their needs. Now again, I'm just telling you, this is where I struggle. And I want to tell you why I struggle so much with this. And maybe it's just me, maybe you got this going on, but maybe it's just me, but I'm just going to confess this openly, all right? So here goes. I'm just confident that what they need to hear is what I need to say. I just feel like because I have so much energy around what I need to say, that must be what they need to hear. And this is often why I always have to apologize, especially as a parent. I mean, come on, how many times has this happened to you as a parent? It has to me. I go upstairs or I go into my kid's room and you just say what needs to be said, and then 20 minutes later you're up there apologizing, and it's like, why am I apologizing? And I say, because you didn't say what they needed to hear in the way they needed to hear it. You said what you needed to say in the way you needed to say it. And Paul's going, come on, grow up, be mature, guard your mouth, be a gatekeeper on that mouth you have. You need to make sure that whatever comes out builds them up according to their need. And the reason I'm confident that they need to hear what I have to say is because I just feel so much better after I said it. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. And I can't understand why they don't feel better. Because I said what I needed to say, the way I needed to say it. The truth is, and I'll just tell you, I'm judging all of us here a little bit. Maybe you're the exception. Most of us are more dialed into what we need to say than what others need to hear. And if we're honest, sometimes we hesitate to say what needs to be heard because it's uncomfortable for us. And all of a sudden, now again, it's about us. Sometimes we're uncomfortable saying what needs to be said because we don't want to alienate them because we would miss them. Oh, well, again, it's about us. Or we fear their rejection. All of a sudden, back to me. It's about us. And before long, we're back to tailoring our words to what suits us. I select my words with me in mind. And this is why it is baked into following Jesus, because Christianity is an others first lifestyle. And look, this is so easy to stand up here and say with a microphone, but the truth is Christianity is an others first lifestyle. Which means I have to choose my words with the needs of the other people over my needs to say things. And if we're not careful, all of a sudden, it's all about me. It's all about us. So I end up selecting my words with me in mind. And I say what's most helpful for me according to my needs, which is fine if I care more about me than I care about you. And this is where Jesus sort of levels the playing field, because he never made it about him, but always made it about others. And then he said, now just follow me and do what I did. He says, I didn't come here to be served. I mean, come on. The most important person on the planet told us, I didn't come here to be served. This isn't about me. I came here to serve you. And then he says, that's how I want you to parent. That's how I want you to employ. That's how I want you to boss and manage. That's how I want you to neighbor. That's how I want you to fiance. That's how I want you to romance. That's how I want you to love. Not to be served, but to serve. And here's what we all know, Christian or not, religious or not, you like it when other people do that for you, don't you? In fact, you do that the right way with the right person, and they will fall in love with you. Because when I know that I'm being heard and I'm being understood, and when people are saying to me what I need to hear, even if it's hard stuff, I feel like, wow, they really have my best interest in mind. And what do? We just lean in. As many of us have leaned into the words of our Heavenly Father who were spoken through Jesus. And so Paul concludes this and he says, but only words, he says, only words that are good for building others up according to their needs. And now he gives us the punchline. He gives us the win. And here's how we know if we did it right, that it may benefit those who listen. In other words, our words should be beneficial, whether they are received as beneficial immediately or later when they come back around. Like, oh man, I was so mad at you when you told me that, but now I realize that was really hard for you to say to me, and you said it anyway, and thank you. It made a difference. It leaves the person on the other side better off and built up in a way that our words should be a gift to them. Now, as you know, we all need to hear things and hear hard things. We all need to, at times, maybe say hard things. But here's the thing. Come on, you know. And people know when you're saying hard things for your own benefit or for their benefit. You do when someone does it to you. Which means when it comes to words, and I love this, that intent is as important as content. Because isn't it true that it's difficult to receive difficult words if we don't trust the other person's intent who's saying them? It's difficult to receive negative words if we suspect someone's intent. But when we know that they really have our best interest in mind, isn't it true that we can receive them? And the same is true for you. And so as Jesus followers, we've been called to be in one another's lives and to encourage one another daily. And so we've got to get this right. And so let's just review. Do not let any unwholesome, stinky, rotting word come out of your mouths, but only words that are good for building others up according to their needs. Why? That it may benefit those who listen to those words. That's what following Jesus sounds like. Which brings me finally to the first of these three dynamics we're going to talk about in this series that play into every conversation you and I have. And here's the first dynamic. All words don't weigh the same. And nobody's going to write down what I'm about to say next because we already all know it. But for some reason, we forget it, that negative words weigh way more than positive words. So to help us not forget that, would you just say that out loud with me today, right? Whether you're online, Liberty Hill, or right here, right? Can we just all say this together? Let's start right here. Negative words weigh way more than positive words. I want us to do it one more time, but I want us to really emphasize way more, right? Let's do it again. Negative words weigh way more than positive words. Now, depending on the study you look at, experts tell us that you need between 5 to 9 positives to counterbalance one negative. But here's the deal. Most of those surveys were done in marketplace relationships. So my theory, and I have no scientific, nothing about science that would help us back this up. It's just a theory, no scientific proof. In marriage, with your kids, your parents, your brother, your sister, your best friend, I don't think it's 5 to 9. I think it's probably 25 to 30 positive to counterbalance a negative. I mean, think of it this way. Growing up, you don't remember much of anything you said to your parents. But there are some things your parents said to you, you will never forget. And the ones that you will never forget are mostly negative things. That conversation that began with, son, never forget, is actually the only part of that conversation you remembered. But the negatives, the critical, the cynical things, the comparisons made, those stuck. They were like a barbed hook. And they hung on and they created wounds that maybe have followed you for the rest of your life. And every time you look in the mirror, you see that thing that your mom or your dad said about you or your sister said, and nobody else notices it, but it's all you can notice because they said it so many times, because words aren't equally weighted, but words weigh a lot. And you know that because you carry some wounds, because words have the potential to wound. And your words have the potential to wound. And we tend to think that all of our words weigh about 4 pounds, but can I tell you, some of your words weigh 104 pounds, and you don't even know. And that isn't as important with people out there in the outer world, but the people who are in your inner circle, it's huge. And we're responsible for the damage we do with our words, for the stewardship of our words. And when it comes to impacting the people around us in such a way that they walk away feeling like, wow, I feel like I was at a construction site, but I feel built up. I feel better. They were so dialed into my needs. And it's like they chose the words that I just needed to hear, and I liked them or I didn't like them, but I know that I needed them. That's what we're called to do. And we're all going to slip up. There's really no way to get this right every time. In fact, I think the only way to not slip up and get it right every time is just to die early, and I don't recommend that at all. And so it is imperative that we load up on the positive and on the constructive. Now, if you're a parent or a grandparent, listen so closely, because this is so important. The positive to negative ratio. Loading up on the positive, overdoing the positive, is what ensures that the constructive becomes constructive criticism, and that it has its intended result. Because that is what you wanted to be received is actually received. What you wanted acted on actually gets acted on. This is what ensures that the negative comments has results and positive change. Now, where this lands with some of you, and I'm just going to press in a little bit hard on this. Dads, you might be a man of few words, and I have a feeling that that might be true for a lot of us guys, that maybe the negatives come more easily than the positives. Like you don't say a lot of positive things, you're not that verbal. But if something goes wrong, you're on it. And in your mind, hey, I'm just telling you the truth. I'm just being honest with you, so you will. But dads, look, if you want your correction to impact your children's direction, you've got to adjust that ratio. You don't quit saying hard things. You don't quit correcting, but you've got to balance. And it is not 1-to-1. Or even 5-to-1, dads. It could be as much as 50-to-1. And you know how, because you're already familiar with this, the idea of portion control. What we're talking about is proportion control. And both of those require self-control. Sarcasm will not make your children tougher. Sarcasm will simply make it tougher for you to connect with your adult children, I promise you. Eliminate that. It doesn't accomplish anything. Load up on the positives, even if it's uncomfortable for you to do. Why? Because it's not about you. You're a Jesus follower, and you're a parent, and you're a grandparent, and it is about him, it is about her, it's about them. And it makes it tough to connect with our children if we don't get this ratio right. Bottom line, words are not equally weighed. Negatives weigh way more. They're needed, but they wound if they're not the exception. We've been told, I mean, you've heard this, right? That it's possible to have too much of a good thing. And every time somebody says it's possible to have too much of a good thing, I always think, is that really true? Because if it's a good thing, I mean, like, how can you have too much of a good thing? It's a good thing. So maybe that's true in some areas, but it is not true when it comes to your words. So look, I'm not a professional counselor, but I honestly feel like I can say this with a lot of confidence. No one has ever traced the root of their problems back to too much encouragement. You cannot overdose a person on encouragement as long as you're actually being sincere. And so I want to encourage all of us, whether we work whether we're at work or home or our neighborhood, let's overdose a little bit on constructive and encouragement. Because in order for us to pave the way, to be able to say the hard things, and to be in a position where you can actually love someone with your words, you pave the way with encouraging, positive construction and sincere words. For some of you, this is so easy, and you're sitting there, and it's easy for you to judge the rest of us that it's not easy for us. I get that. Good for you. Please keep going as a good example for the rest of us. But for some of us, many of us, maybe you didn't grow up with it. Maybe you didn't receive much of it, and there's a tendency for us to hold back. And again, if you're more concerned about you than the other person on the other side of you, that's up to you. But if you're a Jesus follower, this is a part of the equation. And so between now and next time, I want to give you a couple questions to actually think about. The first one is this: where do you have some work to do? Think about that. When it comes to your words, where do you have some work to do? And here's the second question: who is hoping you're going to get to work soon on this? I mean, who is it that's just hoping you didn't just come to church and get another sermon in one ear and out the other? Who is hoping you're really listening and digesting this? Jesus followers, listen. Do not let any stinky, rotten, unwholesome word proceed out of the gate of your mouth, but only words that are good for building up others according to their needs. Why? That they may benefit those who hear it, that it might be a benefit to those who are on the other side of you. So that's what it sounds like to follow Jesus. And we're going to pick it up right there next time. I'm going to invite our bands to come at both our campuses right now, because they're going to bring a song we're going to do every week throughout this series, because we're talking about the way of Jesus and the way to do this. So I want to invite our bands to come as I pray. Father, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the life of Jesus, who loved us and showed us how to do this. Help us, Father, if you would, to lean into this as a place we can grow, and a place that we can get better, and a place we can go to work. And it's a struggle for so many of us. So would you help us to learn your way, not our way, not what we've always known, or maybe what we've taught, or how we grew up. But God, would you help us to learn your way? What is the Jesus way to do this? And so would you help us as we walk through this series to follow you with our words? And we ask it in Jesus' name.